Hey everybody, it's Miss Curley again. This is going to be for Tuesday, which I think is the 14th, and we are going to do two vignettes. One of them is really significant about Sally, as well as one about Mama, which is called A Smart Cookie. So it's going to be in your House on Mango Street book pages 90 to 93, so both of them are really short. If you haven't looked at the slide that has the overview agenda of the week, I'm going to keep adding it every day. So it's the same thing. I don't think I'm changing it today, but if you didn't see it yesterday, that's a new thing that I'm adding. Some students had asked for sort of a weekly overview that was typed up. And then anything that's going to be a graded assignment is going to be in red, which is going to be a quiz, which is going to be over House on Mango Street all the way up through what we cover tomorrow, which will be probably to a page 100. So then the quiz will be probably around 20 multiple choice, and it will be on Thursday. I'm also trying to finish up those essays today. They might go in tomorrow if I don't get all of them done today, but that will be the essay over the hero character. That will be a grade in the grade book. So there'll probably be 2 new grades going in this week. Remember, if you are submitting late work, please do email me. I'm still having trouble tracking it down since we are organizing our our Google Classroom by dates. So I think what I'm going to do is actually put next to the date anything in parentheses that needs to be submitted. So when I go back to old work, I can figure out which day the assignment or the quiz was attached to. It's been kind of challenging when I've had multiple assignments and all it says is Wednesday's work to remember what day I assigned that work when it's a week late and we've had several other things be assigned in the meantime. So please make sure you email me if you're waiting on me to grade something. It has been a challenge with everything being digital and everything being labeled by the day of the week to make sure that I know when you actually submit something if it was not there the first time that I graded. After a week, I'm reluctant to take it at this point unless you email me that there are extenuating circumstances. So a few of you, I will be contacting parents if you are falling really behind on your digital work. It's only a handful of people, but you do need to be logging in every day and checking to see what is due. If there's an extenuating circumstance and you need more time, please reach out to me and I will be very flexible with you. But if you're not logging in for a whole week, then obviously I'm reporting that as absences. And then there'll be people contacting your family. I'll be starting to call to find out why you're not attending electronic classes. We only have 5 more weeks of school, so it's going to go really fast. So again, hang in there. I know this is for some of you not your favorite way to do school, but again, the book is really good at this point, I think, and we've had really good discussion on the discussion boards that I've been enjoying reading. So again, that's kind of the plan for this week. Something we are doing that I put in the agenda that's a little different for tomorrow is that we are going to go live with 3 different sessions. I think I put 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock, and I'm going to put the links in all of my classes so you don't have to do a certain one by your class time period. So if you're in first period and you want to go to a 2 o'clock session, that's fine. If you are in the same class and you would rather do the 11 o'clock session because it works better with your family schedule or what you're going to be having to do in other classes tomorrow, that's fine. So you might be jumping into a discussion that has other kids you know, or maybe some you don't know who are from other sections of my 3 pre-AP classes. We are going to read 2 of the most significant vignettes tomorrow and discuss them live. So I will post notes that are kind of like the ones here that you see on your screen after the discussion for those of you that aren't able to make any of the times, but there will not be a video tomorrow because I am going to do it live. I cannot take a grade on a live discussion because of the district policies, again, knowing that some students just do not have that access to make those times. However, I am strongly encouraging that you do. It is going to be, I think, a very interesting discussion in class when I do these chapters. It's always very important that we talk about these chapters together. There tend to be questions about what actually happened. So it is considered the climax of the novel. The novel wraps up pretty quickly after these 2 chapters, and one of them is really short and one's really long. So tomorrow we'll be reading The Monkey Garden and Red Clowns. So I will do much like what I do on the video where we read the vignette out loud and then we'll have everybody listening and then we're just going to all start jumping in with, well, what do you guys think? What do you think happened? And people can ask questions. I'm planning for the discussions to be about 45 minutes. It can be less if we cover it faster, but I'm going to have usually another class's section starting on the hour the next time. So we'll be wrapping up to make sure I can open another meet for other kids. So plan to try to jump in tomorrow at either 11, 1, or 2. And if one of those times is better, it doesn't matter to me which one. You only need to do one. And we'll be doing that tomorrow to read our vignettes. And then on Thursday, you'll most likely have another video. I think I put that I'm going to actually, no, Thursday is going to be a poem. So Thursday, I'm going to do a poem that I will push out with a short assignment, and it will be a poem that I attach digitally for you to read. And then there'll be the quiz for you to take as a Google form. And then Friday, we'll just have a check-in session for anybody that needs extra help or has questions or just wants to check in. And that will be on Friday. And I'm just going to have, again, one session this week instead of per class period, because we will have already done a Google Meet session tomorrow. So that's sort of the upcoming schedule. So take out your books if you want to follow along. We're on page 90 with the Smart Cookie. And this one is actually the next significant vignette about Mama. Now, we met Mama back at the beginning of the book when we were talking about, again, Hares on page 6. And back in Hares, the mother's character, Mama, was described as comforting, and we said she had pretty hair with like candy circles, curled and pretty because she pinned it in pin curls all day. Sweet to put your nose in when she is holding you. She is the warm smell of bread before you bake it. And we talked extensively about all of those figurative language descriptions and those metaphors comparing her mother to the smell of bread, and how bread was a comfort food, or bread was the sustenance, like give us this day our daily bread, or the idea that bread and water, even in reference to prisoners, is sort of a reference for basic food or basic needs, and that her mother seemed to meet that for Esperanza. So they had a very loving relationship. But we didn't know much else about her until this vignette. So this vignette is really the mother speaking. And so let's go ahead and read a Smart Cookie and figure out where that line comes from. And it's on page 90, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Esperanza's mama. Page 90. A Smart Cookie. I could have been somebody, you know, her mother says and sighs. She had lived in the city her whole life. She can speak 2 languages. She can sing an opera. She knows how to fix a TV, but she doesn't know which subway train to get her to take downtown. I hold her hand very tight while we wait for the right train to arrive. She used to draw when she had time, and now she draws with a needle and thread, little knotted rosebuds, tulips made of silk thread. Someday she would like to go to the ballet. Someday she would like to see a play. She borrows opera records from the public library and sings with velvety lungs powerful as morning glories. Today, while cooking oatmeal, she is Madame Butterfly until she sighs and points the wooden spoon at me. I could have been somebody, you know. Esperanza, you go to school. Study hard. That Madame Butterfly was a fool. She stirs the oatmeal. Look at my comrades. She means Azoria, whose husband left, and Yolanda, whose husband is dead. Got to take care all your own, she says, shaking her head. Then out of nowhere, shame is a bad thing, you know. It keeps you down. You want to know why I quit school? Because I didn't have nice clothes. No clothes, but I had brains. Yep, she says, disgusted, stirring again. I was a smart cookie then. Okay, so that chapter obviously tells us a lot more about Esperanza's mother's background that we didn't know before. So let's go through some of the bulleted points that I put here in the notes. Again, we have in this third bullet that Esperanza tells us some talents that we didn't know about her mother, other than maybe we thought she cooked and did kind of like typical gender roles by taking care of the family with the comfort of the bread smell. But again, she says other talents, like her mother's a good singer. It says that she, again, does things like she can fix a TV, that she knows 2 languages, that she, again, likes opera, that we didn't know any of those things before. However, what's interesting is that she's still shown to be dependent. And again, that's something that I put in the notes there. The reason why she seems dependent is that she still doesn't seem like she can navigate the city alone, and she has to rely on Esperanza to help her. So it says in the first paragraph, but she doesn't know which subway train to take to get downtown. I hold her hand very tight while we wait for the right train to arrive. Now, we would call this role reversal, and we've seen this before with her other parent, her dad. Now, if you remember back to the chapter where her father told her that her grandfather had died in Mexico and that he had to go home for the funeral, that was in Papa Who Wakes Up Tired in the Dark, she had to comfort her father, and she acted like the caregiver, and her father was falling apart and crying emotionally, and she had to comfort him. And in the discussion about that chapter, we talked about how it was role reversal because she was taking the place of the parent figure. We see that again in this chapter, that Esperanza takes the place of the parent figure, and she has to hold her mother's hand when traditionally it would be the mother holding the child's hand to take them on the subway, and that she's the one guiding her mother to get on the right train because her mother is scared. So again, we see that she has these independent skills and that her mother seems to have regrets that maybe she's not as independent because of her circumstances as she wishes she could be. And she's actually encouraging her daughter in this chapter to stay in school and to continue in her path to independence because maybe she has regrets that she does not have that. Again, her advice to Esperanza is very significant because she says on the second page, on page 91 of this vignette, she says, got to take care all your own. And then out of nowhere, she tells her that she regretted quitting school. Now, got to take care all your own kind of translates to you have to take care of yourself. And that would not be typical for her mother's generation as a Hispanic woman, a Catholic wife in the 1970s and 80s in Chicago, who was probably raised just to typically be a stay-at-home mom. And so again, at this point, she notices some of her friends are kind of suffering because they've been left behind by a husband who was entrusted to their full care. And it mentions Yolanda because her husband died, and Azora, whose husband left. And that it makes women vulnerable if they don't have any marketable skills or an education. And then they are left vulnerable if their husbands leave them or if their husbands die. And maybe mama at this point in her life has seen that happen more times than she would like to people who are close friends of hers. And she doesn't want that for Esperanza. So her advice is take care of yourself. You have to be able to make it without just the relationship being your backup plan. So again, she's not saying don't fall in love. She's not saying don't get married. So don't misconstrue that. She is saying you have to be whole with who you are and know you can take care of yourself before you enter in a relationship. And the relationship should not be your safety net. And there's a difference. Marry for love, not as a backup plan. So again, that's an interesting difference, I think, that gender roles are taking now because the mother has seemed very traditional, where maybe we would expect her just to tell Esperanza, find a man, have lots of grandchildren. But she's not saying that. And I think it's because she has some of her own regrets. We found out one of her major regrets, and that's in this last bullet, is that she dropped out of school, probably at junior high age, and because she said, shame is a bad thing. You want to know why I quit school? I didn't have nice clothes. No clothes, but I had brains. And then she sarcastically ends by saying, I was a smart cookie then. Now, a smart cookie would be an idiom for somebody who thought they knew everything, but she's sarcastically saying that, indicating that now she wishes she could have gone back and told her younger self that that was not a smart decision, that she should have stayed in school and not let the teasing or the bullying or the peer pressure of people who maybe were richer or dressed better mock her and then cause her to feel so bad that she wanted to drop out of school to avoid the ridicule. Now she realizes that that decision to drop out of school only hurt herself. It didn't hurt the kids that were making fun of her because she was the one left without an education and without job prospects. And now she's an adult woman who is still scared to ride the subway alone. So again, the long-lasting effects were for her, and she doesn't want that for her daughter. So I really like this chapter. It kind of, again, I think makes Mama a much more well-rounded character than what we thought before. We realized she's had her own struggles, that she was very smart, bilingual, wonderful singer, interested in drama and watching plays, but doesn't have the money to pursue all those extra things in the arts, and that she has regrets, and that she loves her daughter enough to want her to maybe not repeat her same mistakes. So that was A Smart Cookie. And then if you turn over, we see Sally's name in the next title. And I think I told you before, Sally's in 5 vignettes, and we've only seen one so far, which was just called Sally. Now, most of you were posting really kind of negative things about Sally, which I think was appropriate on the discussion board when you had to comment on those chapters. And many people said things like, it seems like Sally's going to be a bad influence. That was kind of the common thread that I saw among all my classes. Many of you picked up on the color black or the raven, which often is a bird that symbolizes death or evil. It's a scavenger bird. And so, again, many people were saying, I don't think she should be friends with her. Sally's going to lead her down the wrong path. Sally seems like a bad influence. Sally seems too worldly. She's in the adult world too soon. I would say all those things that you mentioned are true. It doesn't mean that that was not supposed to be foreshadowing. However, in this chapter, we get to find out what Sally said. And what Sally says is some truth about what's going on at her house. And even though, yes, we can still see that maybe she wouldn't be a great influence and maybe she is making bad choices, this is maybe the reason why she's acting like that. So this is a short vignette, but it's packed full of stuff. So turn to page 92, and let me scroll this up a little bit, and we're going to read what Sally said and find out exactly what Sally has told Esperanza now that she knows there's, again, a friendship and she's trusting her. And we don't know how much time has passed since the last vignette, but it appears that they've deepened their friendship to the point that Sally feels that she's a trusted friend and is willing to confide in her at this point. Page 92, what Sally said. He never hits me hard. She says her mama rubs lard on all the places where it hurts, and then at school she'd say she fell. That's where all the blue places come from. That's why her skin is always scarred. But who believes her? A girl that big, a girl who comes in with her pretty face all beaten black and blue can't be falling off the stairs. He never hits me hard. But Sally doesn't tell about the time he hit her with his hands just like a dog, and she said if I was an animal. He thinks I'm going to run away like his sisters who made the family ashamed just because I'm a daughter. And then she doesn't say. Sally was going to get permission to stay with us a little, and one Thursday she came finally with a sack full of clothes and a paper bag of sweetbread her mama had sent. And she would have stayed too, except when the dark came, her father, whose eyes were little from crying, knocked on the door and said, "Please come back. This is the last time." And she said, "Daddy," and went home. Then we didn't need to worry until one day Sally's father catches her talking to a boy, and the next day she doesn't come to school, and the next, until the way Sally tells it, he just went crazy, just forgot he was her father between the buckle and the belt. "You're not my daughter. You're not my daughter." And then he broke into his hands. Okay, so many people actually posted that they think Sally had a bad home life or was abused. I think that was foreshadowed in the last vignette about her fear about going home, pulling down her skirts, taking off her makeup, and going into the house she could not come out from. I think that was really important. We could definitely tell, I think, the tone of her home life was different than Esperanza's from that last vignette, because Esperanza's never been fearful about being in her home. She's hated her home, but not fearful of her home. And there's a big difference. So again, at this point, obviously, we can see a couple of things that are really significant. To start with, again, "he never hits me hard" was a line that was mentioned twice in the first page. And again, I think that Esperanza realizes that there's some irony to that, because it shouldn't matter how hard he hits you if he's hitting you at all. It's still wrong. Now, again, in the last day, when we talked about statistics of domestic violence, 1 in 4 women are somehow abused in some way, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, or whether it be some sort of emotional abuse. And that's a very high statistic, but it includes all sorts of inappropriate treatment and intimidating behavior. Now, this is, again, physical abuse, much like we saw with Minerva, who was also bruised. But we see this justifying in Sally's comment of "he never hits me hard," which seems to kind of support the idea that she still loves her father and that she's still justifying his behavior because it's really not that bad. And it's said twice, which kind of makes us realize she's probably repeating it a lot to maybe even try to believe it herself. And like the article that I sent you a link on Friday or Thursday, again, this type of behavior, maybe it was yesterday. I don't remember when I sent you the link. I think it was for yesterday, actually. The behavior about abuse is often that people do love their abusers. And in this case, she does love her father. And when he comes to pick her up later, she does call him daddy, not just dad or father or not anything at all. She calls him a term of endearment, which is maybe what reminds you of a little girl saying to her father whom she loves. So again, there is this sort of juxtaposition in abusive relationships between the love and affection in the times when the abuser is not abusing and maybe actually affirming the child or the spouse, and then the times when there's eruptions and anger and there is physical abuse going on, and then they apologize and they get taken back, like we saw with Minerva, who let him back in after he threw the rock through the window. Sally does the same thing. She lets her father apologize and goes home with him, even after she'd made it so far as to get out of the house to safety. Then she goes back and gets abused again. So again, we can actually, I think, feel more sorry, I think, if anything, for Sally. I think this chapter changes the tone about maybe how judgmental we've been towards her. Yes, she still might be flirting. Yes, she still probably is meeting an emotional void through inappropriate relationships with boyfriends to maybe make her feel better about herself. But I think it makes a lot more sense. She's just not someone with loose morals at this point. She's somebody who's abused, who's seeking to feel affirmed and loved, but she's looking for it in all the wrong places. And so again, the beatings seem to be repetitive. It's mentioned black and blue, which means that he's actually bruising her to where other people are aware of it. And again, it reminds me also of Rafaela's husband, who seeks to control her because there seems to be some kind of jealousy her father has about boys. And we saw that with Rafaela, where it said that her husband said she was too beautiful and was scared other men would look at her, so he locked her up. Her father, for Sally, on page 92, says he doesn't want her to end up like his sisters, and he thinks that she's gonna run away with a boy. And then on page 93, it says, until one day Sally's father catches her talking to a boy, and then he seems to beat her because of that. So whatever it is, whether it's his religious views or because something happened in his family and he's afraid she's going to get pregnant or she's going to run away with somebody that's not an appropriate choice. He is trying to control her with fear. He's also maybe jealous of losing her and her, devotion to him as a father to another boy who's going to have her leave his house to go move in with him and marry him. So it seems that that's the trigger for him, is this jealousy. And again, Esperanza's family does offer her a refuge. And we see on page 93 that Esperanza's family is willing to take her in, and she comes with her clothes and a bag of sweetbread baked by her mother, and she's planning to stay for a short period of time. Now, I think what's really interesting about that is that the mother is aware of the abuse. And I think that's really significant that Sally's mom knows. And we know for sure she knows because it says in paragraph 1, her mama rubs lard on all the places where it hurts. So her mother sees the abuse and helps her clean her wounds, but she leaves her in the house. Now, I think that's a really hard thing for us to fathom about why would a parent stay if their child is being abused at the hands of their spouse. But we have to maybe realize the mother's abused too. I think that's a really likely scenario, although we never have a vignette about Sally's mom. Additionally, her mom could be completely Spanish speaking. She could be, again, completely uneducated. She could not have held a job. She might be completely financially dependent on the husband. And maybe she's fearful if she tried to leave, she wouldn't be able to support her child. She wouldn't have a place to go and she would lose custody, or she would, again, be on the streets and be homeless. And so she thinks surely he'll get better. Maybe she does love him. All those things tend to be reasons why women stay. He also could just be threatening her and saying, if you take my child, I will do this to you. Don't you dare leave me or this will happen. And so the mother stays and she rubs lard on her daughter's wounds. And lard would be like an animal fat substance. Probably the closest thing I could explain would be like some sort of like a Vaseline is maybe what we would use now, some sort of an ointment. So maybe if she has some bruising or she has some open cuts from a belt buckle, her mother will bind up her wounds and put salve on it to make them better. But her mother doesn't stop the abuse nor remove her from the abuse. That night, Sally's dad comes to Esperanza's house and apologizes, and he's in tears. And this is a typical cycle of abuse that was in the article that I sent you. So this is the apologetic side. I'll never happen again. I'm so sorry. I love you. Please come home. And she does throw herself into his arms, it said. And again, it says daddy, and goes home with him. Now, again, sure enough, the cycle starts back up again because he gets jealous, like I just said, about seeing her with a boy, and then she misses several days of school. And during that time, we find out that he broke into a rage and forgot that she was his daughter between the buckle and the belt. And that seems to indicate that he's beating her like an animal, not like his daughter, with the buckle and the belt buckle. Now, the very last line tends to be somewhat confusing. Again, he's yelling at her, you're not my daughter, you're not my daughter. But then the last part, and then he broke into his hands, could possibly have two different interpretations. If you break into your hands, he could be breaking down, sobbing and like crying, like breaking down. Why did I do this? I'm so sorry. And sobbing into his hands and breaking down emotionally. The other interpretation of breaking into his hands is that he actually changes from swinging the belt to using his fists and breaks into his hands to hit. That's also kind of referenced on page 92, where it says Sally doesn't tell about the time he hit her with his hands just like she was a dog. So I think Cisneros is actually intentionally using a phrase with a double meaning because possibly he does both. Maybe he also hits her with the belt, then starts punching her with his hands, and then also cries. And so it kind of shows that continued cycle. So overall, I think at this point, we can agree that Sally is a much more sympathetic character because we see what causes her to act this way at school, where she desires to be loved. She's flirting with boys, maybe dressing too provocatively, moving into the adult world too quickly, all because she's trying to escape an abusive home and find a way to feel good about herself and escape that. And we don't know the rest of her story yet. So that's where maybe you can make some predictions. But she's in 3 more vignettes. She'll be in tomorrow in both the 2 vignettes that we read together, which are Monkey Garden and Red Clowns. If you do not want spoilers, don't read ahead. Many of you have read ahead, so please don't give away endings or tell friends what's going to happen if they don't want to know. So tomorrow we'll be reading those 2 vignettes live. So try to jump into one of our Google Live meets on Wednesday, and they will be at either 11, 1, or 2. And so you can jump into any of them, and I'll post all those 3 links right before they open up on all the 3 class periods of Google Classroom, and you can just pick the time that's most convenient to you. So today you do need to make a comment in the discussion post for Tuesday attendance based on one of these 2 vignettes, and either post a question, comment on another classmate's comment, or make a comment or something you noticed yourself. And then hopefully there'll be some more good discussion about Sally as you continue to comment, and then the quiz will be on Thursday. So have a good day.